Dr. Seuss Horse Museum, illustrated by Andrew Joyner. Horse Museum. There's our end pages. And our title page, it also looks like it was signed. I don't know if that's in every book. That's really cool. So, Dr. Seuss Horse Museum. Art. What is it all about? This is what art is about. Art is when an artist looks at something like a horse, for instance, and they see something in that horse that excites them. So they do something about it. They tell you about it in any one of a number of ways. Artists have been excited by horses for as long as there have been artists. But what an artist tells us about horses and how they tell us is different for every artist. What an artist sees in a horse depends on many different things, their backgrounds, likes and dislikes, you name it. So come with me. Let's look at how different artists have seen horses. Maybe we can find some ways of looking at them ourselves. Look it over, think it over, talk it over. When most people look at me, they just see me, like this. But when an artist looks at me, they see a million other things. Can you? What would you put on this canvas? Some artists look at horses and see their outlines. To other artists, like this Chinese sculptor, a horse is not an outline at all. A horse is bulk, a solid form. A Japanese artist looked at a horse. What he saw was beautiful lines from head to tail. Some artists look at a horse and find color. And underneath each of these, I'm not reading them, it tells you who the artist is. So they're getting credit for their work. Other artists are interested in shape. So underneath each of the pictures of the art, it says who created that art. This artist looked at a horse and saw strength. A Spaniard named Velázquez painted horses by the dozens. He saw them as something for kings and princes to sit on while he painted them. Velázquez worked for kings and princes. He never got any money from the horses. Oh, you know what? I missed a page right before this. I thought there was one more. These artists looked and they saw speed. So somehow I missed that one. Speed. Felt like there were too many pages there in my hand. This painting is by a Frenchman named Meissonier. Horses to him were something necessary to carry generals into battle. He loved to paint generals going into battle. To him, the horse was a jeep, in the days before the jeep was invented. On the rock walls of a cave in France nearly 22,000 years ago, someone painted this horse by the light of a fire. What did the cave artist see in a horse? We don't know. It's a mystery. What do you think? 2,000 years ago in Greece, artists looked at horses and imagined them with wings. Pegasus was an immortal flying horse in Greek mythology. Greek artists painted horses with wings as symbols for ideas like immortality that are very hard to show in a picture. 500 years ago in Persia, people thought a horse was for having fun on, and that's what the Parisian artists saw when they looked at horses. So that's this picture on this side. And then 500 years ago in Italy, the artist Raphael looked at a horse. He thought that a horse was for fighting dragons on. Of course, some artists looked at horses and wanted to paint them just as they appeared in the natural world, doing things that horses really do. We call this kind of art realistic. Other artists looked at horses and tried to capture them in a moment of time. We call this style of art Impressionism. Impressionist art often has a soft, slightly out of focus appearance. So there's two examples of Impressionist art. Then we come to what people call modern art. Some people call this crazy stuff. Maybe they're right, maybe they're wrong, but these are paintings, drawings, and sculptures that show what certain artists imagined when they looked at a horse. So please look at them very carefully. There are lots of ways of looking at things. Maybe these pictures have something to tell you. So there's some modern art. I kind of like this one in the middle with the old lady coming through the thing. Surrealism is a way of looking at things, including horses, that draws on, in part, an artist's dreams. Dreams can be very strange, and so can surrealist art. All right, so there's 3 examples of surrealist art. Expressionism is an art style that uses exaggerated colors and brushstrokes to show the emotion an artist wants us to feel when we look at something. What do you feel when you look at this? So there's 2 examples of Impressionism. You can always pause if you want to think about how you feel about any of these. Cubism is a way of looking at things from different angles all at the same time. Cubists don't want to copy things the way they normally look. A famous artist named Picasso liked horses. He liked bulls too. He drew a lot of them. All right. Cubism. Abstract art can have a subject, but it doesn't need one. It uses color and shape to create a visual experience. These abstract images do have subjects, horses and riders, of course. This artist used just a few lines and splotches of color in this woodcut, but when you look at it, you can see a galloping horse and rider, right? What do you see when you look at branches and driftwood? The artist who made this sculpture saw a horse made out of driftwood. This abstract drawing in space shows what looks like a big strong horse, but you wouldn't want to sit on its back. All it is made of is thin steel wire. On the other page, ouch, if you tried to sit on that one. An American painter named Jackson Pollock found a hobby horse head and glued it onto a canvas before doing this abstract drip painting. Pollock dripped, splattered, and flung paint as a way to insert himself into his paintings. Maybe this is Pollock on a horse? We don't know. That's a different style. So what do you think? Is this stuff crazy or is it crazy good? Looking at art and thinking about it is fun. There's no right or wrong way to do it. Museums are good places to find art. You can find art in other places too. So a museum is just one place to find art. One such place to look is in books. The horses shown below and to the right are from books illustrated by a man who never studied drawing. His name was Dr. Seuss. Dr. Seuss didn't write horses, but he looked at them carefully and saw something in them. Can you guess what that something was? So look at the horse once again. A horse is many, many, many things, all depending on what you see. And you can see the man's holding a whole bunch of Dr. Seuss books in his hand. And then, this is the cool part, and I don't think I have enough time to read all of them. At the back of this book, if you borrow it from the library or buy it, it has each of the works of art we saw, and it tells you more about them. So each of those pages had a work by an artist, and it said who it was by. Well, back here, we have a picture of what it was, and it tells you who did that work, what it is, and it gives you a little bit about it. And there are a lot of pages back here because there was a lot of artwork in here. So that is super cool. I'm just going to do one of them. I'm going to do our one of the driftwood horse. So that's the one I'm going to read. But if you borrow the book, you can read all of them. This one says it's by Deborah Butterfield, and it's an untitled work made out of bark. It was made in 1994, and it also says bronze. Deborah Butterfield's first memories are of horses. Born in California, she grew up riding and still does so today, competing in dressage. She began sculpting horses in college, and they are the single subject of her work. Butterfield draws her horses with found objects, including branches, scrap metal, barbed wire, pipes, and fencing, which she then casts in bronze. She has said, "I first used the horse image as a metaphorical substitute for myself. It was a way of doing a self-portrait one step removed from the specificity That's a tricky one. Of Deborah Butterfield. So it's made out of driftwood and then cast in bronze. So that's why it says bark and bronze. She uses all found objects. Isn't that a nice reduce, reuse, recycle sort of idea? So that was this one here. But like I said, you could read about all of them. They're all back here. And there's also, which I don't know that I have time for, some notes at the back. I'm going to start reading it, and if I run out of time, I run out of time. But we'll see how much we can get through about the notes. So it says, Dr. Seuss's Horse Museum, notes from the publisher. According to his wife Audrey, Ted Geisel, aka Dr. Seuss, had no interest in horses, but something that definitely did interest him was art. It had been that way all his life. Ted began drawing as a young child. He kept pencils near his bed for doodling, on paper and on walls, and he carried a sketchbook with him on weekends when he'd visit the zoo in Springfield, Massachusetts. Ted drew animals his own way, with exaggerated and mismatched features. He said he viewed the world through the wrong end of the telescope. In high school, Ted took his first and only art class. He was sketching a still life and had turned his drawing pad upside down to work on when the teacher stopped him. No, Theodore, not upside down. There are rules that every artist must abide by. Ted transferred out after that one class. He had a natural understanding of how to draw and didn't believe in art by the rule book. In college at Dartmouth, Ted studied English literature and writing. Later, with no formal training, Ted would go on to make his living as an artist, as a cartoonist, an advertising artist, a sculptor, and eventually as the very successful author and illustrator of 42 children's books. But that didn't mean Ted wasn't interested in learning about art. He traveled widely and visited museums around the world. He spoke to educators and other artists about art. He became a trustee of the San Diego Museum of Fine Arts, and, as his wife Audrey discovered in 2013, he wrote a book about art too. 21 years after Ted's death, Audrey Geisel was cleaning out Ted's studio and found a box containing a manuscript and sketches for a book titled Horse Museum. The book you are reading now is based on the manuscript and those sketches. Horse Museum was found in the same box that also included Ted's manuscript and sketches for What Pet Should I Get?, which Random House published in 2015. Neither manuscript was dated. We can only guess when Horse Museum was written. We suspect it was in the early 1950s. It was around this time that Ted wrote a script for a half-hour educational television show about modern art, titled Modern Art on Horseback. The program starred Ted as Dr. Seuss, the actors Burgess Meredith, Hans Confried, and Dorothy Donahue, 6 students from the Cooper Union School of Art, and a white stallion. The premise of the show, when a modern artist paints a picture of a horse, why doesn't the horse look like a horse? Before the broadcast, Ted spent 10 days with the art students discussing ideas about painting. Then each student actor received a script written by Ted, which they were to follow. Here is an excerpt. When an artist looks at a horse, the image of what the horse looks like goes into his brain. And there in the brain is where the artistry takes place. The artist looks at it not from a photographic point of view. He says to himself, what does this horse mean to me personally? What an artist sees in a horse depends entirely on the artist's background, his education, his experience, his likes and dislikes, and 1,000 other things. To one artist, a horse may mean speed, to another strength, to another gentleness. Another artist can look at this horse and see only color or some beautiful lines or some interesting shapes. Sadly, film footage of the television program no longer exists, but Cooper Union published a copy of the television script, and a photograph from the publication is shown to the right. And for whatever reason, Ted's manuscript and sketches for Horse Museum was placed in a box with What Pet Should I Get? About 3/4 of the Horse Museum text was in the boxes. What was missing from the manuscript were pages on modern art, whose artists Ted referred to as contemporaries. If you look at the bottom right corner of the sketch below, you'll see that Ted wrote, lead into examples of surrealism, expressionism, cubism, and abstractism, and non-object art with explanation. So there's a little picture of his notes. With the exception of the missing pages on modern art, Ted drew rough pencil sketches of the entire book. The unfinished manuscript and sketches are a priceless find of great interest to scholars and others who admire Dr. Seuss. But to reach Ted's intended audience of children, Dr. Seuss Enterprises and the editors at Random House decided to complete the missing sections of the text, which they did themselves, and to hire an illustrator, Andrew Joyner, to bring the book to life. Andrew lives in a small rural town in Australia, which, to quote Andrew, could be described as horse-obsessed. In fact, his local high school offers a class in equine studies, but Andrew is not himself a horse enthusiast. To draw the horses in this book, Andrew first looked at how Ted Geisel drew horses. He even gave himself an art lesson by copying some of Ted's horses. But I can't draw like Ted. In fact, I'm not sure anyone can. Even his simplest sketches are instantly recognizable and distinctly his